Hello again, everybody. Welcome to the Backbone Podcast, where common sense still makes sense in a world that is sick and only getting sicker. And I tell you, this past week it was great for me, and I hope it was great for you. My son's football team, just to give you a little update, they won their last game, and this week is championship week, so we have a huge championship game coming up for our little high school here, and it's the first one ever. So this will be the first time that they'll ever do this, that we'll ever see this. Hopefully, everybody in town comes out. Saturday night, I also saw a favorite of mine, Stevie Nicks, 77 years old, and I have to tell you, she was magnificent. She did gold. If you're not a fan of Stevie Nicks, or if you heard of Stevie Nicks, she has a bunch of songs. I mean, she sold with Fleetwood Mac in her solo career probably close to 200 million records. The woman is she's majestic. She's mystical. I mean, bohemian, whatever you want to call it. She just pulls you in, even at 77 years old. And she did all the hits, of course, but she has a song called Gold Dust Woman, and there's a part where she has to hold a note, and the entire audience gasped as she held this note so effortlessly. Just amazing. And you might wonder, well, what does that have to do with the topic that we're going to discuss today, Mark David Chapman being denied parole again? Well, the reason why is one of Stevie's most popular songs, maybe her most popular song, is called Edge of 17. That song was written right after she heard the news of Lennon being shot and killed in front of his apartment building, the Dakota building, on December 8th, 1980. If you know the lyrics to that song, there's the famous chorus, of the white-winged dove. The white-winged dove represents John Lennon. And Mark David Chapman, of course, shot John Lennon 4 times in the back in front of Yoko Ono and his baby that night. A couple hours before that, Lennon was gracious enough to sign a record for Mark David Chapman, thinking he was just a fan. But Mark David Chapman, of course, is deranged. There's been a lot of stories about who he is and where he's from, and if he was an MK Ultra, recipient. But he had a parole board meeting recently, and he made the statement that the reason why he killed John Lennon was because he wanted to be famous. Which you might think is pathetic. Most people do. But that was his excuse on his 14th attempt at gaining parole. And of course, the shocking crime, which was broadcasted on Monday Night Football famously by Howard Cosell, will have its 45th anniversary on the 8th of December. If you are familiar with New York, you will know in Central Park there is a section called Strawberry Fields where people gather on October 9th for Lennon's birthday, and of course December 8th, the anniversary of his death. They will gather there en masse, and it's I was not a Beatles fan. I was never a Beatles fan. I liked Lennon's the album he made in, what was it, 1978, 1979, I think, was with Woman, and I liked that album. I was never that big of a Beatles fan. They just didn't do it for me. But you don't want to see somebody at the age of 40 being gunned down in front of his family either. Now, Mark David Chapman, of course, is quoted as saying, "This was for me and me alone. Unfortunately, it had everything to do with his popularity." Chapman, 70, said at the Greenhaven Correctional Facility in Dutchess County. That's in upstate New York. According to an interview transcribed obtained by the New York Post on Friday. Chapman continues to say, "My crime was completely and absolutely selfish. And this is typical of something that is not common today. If there's one thing social media did, it's made everybody out to be a star. Everybody has an outlet where they can criticize you or criticize some media person, and they can become famous just by sitting in their basement and being on a computer. 40 years ago, that wasn't possible. Famous people were bigger than life. Famous athletes, they were bigger than life. So if you saw them, you were in awe of them if they were up close to you. Today, not so much. I mean, you have TMZ, you have media all over the place, social media all over the place, and frankly, there aren't great larger than life stars anymore. I mean, there's so much stuff that comes out on these people that you're like, I don't want to be like them. I mean, all these people that are connected with the Epstein Island shit. I mean, you really want to be in that world? We know that it's now demonic. You have to sell your soul to be in that world. And it's an awful, awful, awful bubble to be in. Now, Chapman assassinated the beloved 40-year-old Beatle. As we said, outside of the Dakota building, he apologized for causing devastation to fans and friends of the rock legend, but the board, of course, denied his parole, not buying his sorrowful plea. Asked by a commissioner why he wanted to murder John Lennon, he said, and I quote, "To be famous, to be something I wasn't. And then I just realized, hey, there's a goal here. I don't have to die. I don't have to die, and I can be a somebody. I had sunk that low." There are a lot of cases back in the day where people, if you ever took any communication courses or any type of media courses, there's something called a parasocial relationship. And it happens a lot with television shows. It happens a lot today with reality shows, where people believe that when they watch a show every week or they see a movie of an actor every week, that person is their friend. If they listen to a record, that John Lennon's singing to them. And it's a thing of loneliness. It's depression. Uh, just lack of being raised by loving, caring parents. And it's actually sad. But this is when stalking became a big thing. David Letterman dealt with a stalker who used to come up right to his house. And of course, I'm going to mention Rebecca Schaefer later because there's a weird connection. But Rebecca Schaefer was the first. She was on a show called My Sister Sam, and she was harassed by this deranged nut job. There were no laws for stalking or, restraining orders in those days. And unfortunately, this guy kept coming at her after she made numerous pleas for help from the police, and the police are useless. We know that. And the day, unfortunately, came where she was shot and killed by this maniac because he watched her on TV and he believed in his warped mind that she was in love with him and he was in love with her and that they should be together. And when she said, she rejected him because he's sick, he took her away from the world. Again, I'm not saying that there are no crazy people out there. There are. We all know that. Maybe more so than ever before because of the drugs. But it doesn't seem like these parasocial relationships are as common as they used to be, because now everybody has an outlet with social media. You can go on some rapper's Instagram and tell him to go fuck himself, and he might actually respond and tell you to go fuck yourself back, and it's a thing. In those days, you could not. In those days, you only had the paparazzi that used to hang around the buildings, and they never told you where John Lennon would be or where Marlon Brando would be, because they wanted that picture. Now, everybody has a camera. Everybody has an outlet. Everybody is a reporter. There's some good, there's some bad with that. Chapman recounted the grisly slaying at an August 27th hearing, telling the board that he flew to New York from Hawaii months earlier, intent on killing Lennon after Chapman identified with the character Holden Caulfield from the American classic The Catcher in the Rye, and he believed that Lennon was a materialist phony. A lot of people believe that. A lot of people believe that. The Beatles kind of lost their innocence after their breakup, and people just, they grew up and moved on from him. The Beatles weren't a very popular band. They were famous, but nobody really talked about the Beatles like they do today in the 1970s, 80s, 90s. This all stuff that the Beatles are the greatest, blah blah blah. That's all boomer stuff today. 1970s, people weren't talking about the Beatles. People were talking about Fleetwood Mac and Zeppelin and the Eagles and all these other great bands, Aerosmith. They were talking about those guys. Nobody was talking about the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, of course. The Beatles were seen as ho-hum, the safe alternative in music. While the Rolling Stones were the bad boys, and Aerosmith were the bad boys, and Zeppelin too. Chapman was 25 years old at the time, and he was lurking outside of the Dakota in October, waiting for Lennon, but he never showed. Months later, he returned when he, as quoted by Chapman, after the compulsion started building again. That morning of the 8th, this is Chapman, of course, that morning of the 8th, I just knew. I don't know how I knew, but I just knew that this was going to be the day that I was going to meet and kill him being John Lennon. When Lennon stepped out of a limo with wife Yoko Ono, Chapman blasted 4 bullets into his back just hours before the guitarist had signed an album for Chapman. Chapman was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Now, in more recent years, Chapman spends his time at Bible study. He plays lots of volleyball, apparently, and with other inmates, and he catches up with his wife, Gloria, to whom he's been married to for 46 years. How is that working out? I mean, do these guys get conjugal visits? And who are these women marrying these guys in jail? This is the reason why women have to be, women need to be brought to heel. They're sick. They are absolutely mad. Where is her father in this? I mean, he's probably dead, but where was her father during this whole time? And Chapman has expressed remorse for the murder in several parole hearings. But, these guys always, you'll say anything to get out of jail. He referred to Lennon as a human being and quotes as saying, "Here I am living so much longer, and not just family, but his friends and family. I apologize for the devastation that I caused, for the agony that I caused, that they must go through. I had no thought about that at the time. I didn't care." And despite the apologies and all the talk, the board found him to have a lack of, quote, genuine remorse and meaningful empathy for the victims. His next eligible parole will be in 2027. He'll be 72 years of age. Chapman now says that he'd rather avoid the spotlight. "I don't have any interest in being famous. Put me under a rug somewhere. I don't want to be famous anymore." Now, what does The Catcher in the Rye have to do with any of this? If you've ever read the book, and nowadays they don't even make kids read books anymore, but I had to read this in high school. This was a book written by J.D. Salinger, a Jew, and it's still very popular, and it's very, very controversial. This book has been tied to 3 bizarre instances: the Mark David Chapman murder of John Lennon, the John Hinckley Jr. assassination attempt of Ronald Reagan in 1981. People found The Catcher in the Rye in his hotel, the book The Catcher in the Rye, in his hotel room. Hinckley's possession of the novel was later dismissed as an influence, but he did have notes written in that book about how he identified with Caulfield. Holden Caulfield is this young teenage boy in the book. The book's about rebellion, and they talk about various things in the 1950s that you didn't really hear, like he encounters a prostitute and a pimp, alcohol. He hates different racial groups, all that shit, right? It's a boy who, it's a narrative. So he's in a sanitarium at the time he's telling you this story. He gets kicked out of his private high school, and he just hates life. He's a boy who's just didn't like life at the time. It's an okay read. It's not that great of a book, frankly. And the third instance was by, as I said, Rebecca Schaeffer's murderer, Robert John Bardo, where he was carrying the book when he visited Schaeffer's apartment in Hollywood on July 18th, 1989, and when he murdered her. This book is controversial because of its themes. They talk about homosexuality, they talk about sex, they talk about people being phony, or people being people who are dishonest. They talk about different things. A lot of people believe that the term snowing that was in the book would refer to heroin, or deceiving or misleading people. This book has been such a it's been rewritten a few times. They've made movies about it. But Schlesinger actually wrote this book during his time in World War II, which means that he must have had a lot of free time on his hands. So what does this tell you? Well, I don't know. Mark David Chapman's going to stay in jail. He's probably going to die in jail. He killed the guy for no reason. And the fact that the story just came out now about his parole being denied, and me seeing Stevie last Saturday, I just figured I'd do a little show on this. Don't ever, they always say don't meet your heroes. I met two of them. I thought they were pretty cool. Al Pacino was a great guy. And I met John Bon Jovi. He was a good guy too. They say don't meet your heroes. Don't fascinate about these people. Remember, they put their pants on just like you, one leg at a time. And a lot of them have a lot harder lives than you would ever want. Don't be influenced by them either. Enjoy their music, enjoy their movies, enjoy their books. It's to help you forget about your issues for a couple hours. That's fine. But when some of these people are just lonely and depressed, they don't really have much going on in their lives, they take it too far. Don't take it too far. It's for entertainment purposes only. And that's my 2 cents. Thanks again for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Remember, my friends, Satan is always busy. Be a man, have a backbone, because masculinity and common sense are worth standing up for. And remember, if it ends in an ism, it's a mental disorder. We'll see you later.